In the midst of deep grief, the risen Jesus brought Mary true comfort and heavenly peace. He met her in her pain and called her towards him even in her heartbreak. He embraced her and opened her eyes and her heart to a new outlook on death. Through his resurrection, Jesus showed Mary that death has no power over the love of Christ. He took death's sting and replaced it with salvation. Now, 2,000 years later, we too can remember that even in the thick of grief, loss, or mourning, His grace is sufficient, and His love holds us close. This story is inspired by the biblical account of Mary and her encounter with the resurrected Jesus. While this is based on a true story from the Bible, we have taken creative license to truly capture the experience and emotions of Mary and other characters in this Easter series.
It was like time froze, ice cold and unforgiving as we watched from a distance while the guards taunted Jesus. They mocked him like he was an evil criminal. He didn't fight back, nor did he try to run each time they cracked their whips. Instead, he just stood there, with his hands chained together, his blood falling to the ground with each brutal lash that split open his skin, and the crown of thorns piercing the top of his head. Then, once the guards had their fun torturing him, they took a hammer and a set of rust-encrusted nails and nailed him to the wooden cross that they had made him carry all the way to Calvary. With each thunderous bang of the hammer and every pain-stricken cry that left him as the nails punctured his hands, then his feet, I felt my heart tear open in grief. I watched my Lord, my Savior, my teacher, and my dear friend die right before my eyes. Watching him on the cross felt like drowning in slow motion. There was no way to help him as he suffered and no way to stop them as they beat him. I felt the world come crashing down around me as grief swallowed me whole, taking my breath away and leaving me empty, broken, angry, and confused. Why did Jesus let them do this to him? Why didn't he stop them? We watched him perform much greater miracles before, so why didn't he do something now? After what felt like forever, watching Jesus fight for every breath as the pressure on his body became too much for it to bear, we finally saw him take his last breath. At that exact moment, it seemed as if God reached down from the heavens and shook the earth. A massive earthquake tore through the ground and the sky turned black. The guards, who just a few moments ago were laughing, stood stunned and terrified, quivering as they realized that Jesus truly was who he had said he was, the Son of the living God. I looked up at the cross and saw our beloved Jesus' lifeless body nailed to its beams. I'll never forget that image, nor that moment. A moment where death seemed to have defeated the one who so often spoke of life. But little did I know what the next few days would hold, how they would change everything and everyone for good, how they would change me, mend me, and show me a side of love that I'd never known before. Late in the afternoon, after Jesus had been dead for a few hours, a man named Joseph, a disciple of Jesus from Arimathea, asked Pilate for Jesus' body. Joseph wanted to give Jesus a proper burial, and so he cleaned and treated his body, then wrapped it in new linen. Joseph had even organized for a new tomb to be cut from a rock, and there he placed Jesus' body before closing the tomb with a huge stone. Joseph left after Jesus had been laid in the tomb, but I stayed there, staring at the stone, trying to comprehend everything that had just happened. Yet, all I could think about was how much I missed Jesus, and how would we ever get over this? As the evening approached, a troop of guards and Pharisees came to the tomb. They secured the rock so that it could not be moved, and then they stood around the entrance to stop anyone from getting in. Little did we know that it would not be someone getting in the tomb over the coming days, but someone getting out. A few days later, after the Sabbath, I went with the other Mary to the tomb. The guards were still guarding its entrance just as they had been ordered to. Then suddenly, as Mary and I sat there praying, there was a loud, booming rumble. The ground beneath us shook and shuddered, and fear flickered across all of our faces. Next, the sky split open and an angel descended to us from the heights of the heavens. He was cloaked in bright, luminous light, and his garments were the purest white I'd ever seen. As he came down from above us, he moved the stone which concealed the tomb, as if it was light as a feather. And he sat upon it and smiled. The guards were paralyzed with terror. They couldn't move nor speak. Instead, they stood frozen, with their faces as pale as linen. We could not believe our eyes when the angel began speaking to us. I'll never forget his words. Do not be afraid, for there is nothing to fear. I know you're looking for Jesus, the one whom they nailed to the cross, but he is not here. He is risen, just as he said he would. Then he led us into the tomb, where there was nothing but old cloth scattered where they had laid Jesus' body. Looking around, the tomb was surreal. I had watched Jesus die with my own eyes just 3 days earlier, and if he really had risen, surely he would have come to us. With all these thoughts racing through my mind, the angel told us to go and tell the other disciples that Jesus had risen from the dead. Still unsure about what was going on, we ran as fast as we could to the others to tell them everything we had seen and heard from the angel. But as we were running, a man came before us and stopped us in our tracks. At first, I didn't recognize him. I was overwhelmed with so many emotions: grief, confusion, doubt, curiosity, maybe even the smallest bit of hope that Jesus really had risen. He asked me why I was crying. Truthfully, I didn't know where to begin. So much had happened over the last 3 days. How could I possibly tell him about it all? For a moment, I forgot about what the angels had said, and I thought he might have been the one to have taken Jesus' body. And so I asked if he was the one who had moved Jesus from the tomb. His response changed everything. "Mary," he said. And instantly, his voice made sense. It was like the mixed-up puzzle of my heart had suddenly been put back together. All of my grief and fear and heartache were swallowed by the warmth of his voice. I felt love wash over me, kissing the hurt inside my heart and leaving its peace to meet my pain. This man was Jesus, the one who I had been searching for, and the one who had been right there all along. When he met with me, I was blinded by grief and all the baggage it brought with it. But when he spoke my name, his voice reached my soul. He didn't laugh at me, nor turn me away because of my tears, but he welcomed me into the comfort of his arms. Seeing him didn't change that he'd died, but it did change how I thought about death. Because of Jesus, I understand that death is not the end. It cannot keep up hostage to its sting, and it does not mean defeat. Instead, through Jesus and his triumph over the grave, I know now that even in the face of death, there is still life. When his grace met my grief, I found my hope afresh, my peace restored, and my joy renewed.